Great. This was a great opportunity to thank the workers at the Postal Processing Plant here in Hamden, which serves 2/3 of the state. They have been coming to work, processing the mail. Our letter carriers are out there delivering it day after day. They are truly an example of frontline workers during the coronavirus. And I wanted to come and say thank you to them and also to let them know that I am supporting an effort in the Senate to provide funding to the Postal Service, which is in danger of running out of funding this fall. That would be a catastrophe for the state of Maine. As a rural state, we are heavily dependent on the Postal Service, and there's not going to be some for-profit company that's going to step in and serve the rural areas of our state. Being here also brings back memories of 2012 when this plant was targeted for closure. That would have been a disaster for mail delivery in 2/3 of the state of Maine. And I authored the legislation that puts service standards in place and helped to save this plant. It has wonderful workers who are really working hard for us today.
What do you think about the quote strings attached funding for the Postal Service? Senator King said part of the problem is Trump's personal issues with Jeff Bezos and Amazon. What do you think about that?
We did provide funding for lending to the Postal Service, but frankly, that isn't sufficient. That's why I've joined a bipartisan effort with Senator Dianne Feinstein heading up the Democratic side. I'm heading up the Republican side to provide $25 billion to the Postal Service so that it can meet its payroll. Otherwise, the officials at the Postal Service tell us that they risk running out of money to pay their workers come this fall. We simply can't have that happen. I do believe that the administration has put too many strings on the borrowing. Congress didn't put those strings attached. It was the administration, and that's not our intent. And I think in the next coronavirus bill, we should put in language making clear that that lending authority to the Postal Service did not come with different strings attached.
Now, taking that wider view of the next stimulus package, I know there was some discussion about providing money directly to municipalities and states.
Yes.
Does Maine stand to benefit from that?
I have been working on another bipartisan bill to be incorporated into the next package that would provide $500 billion to states, municipalities, and counties. Now, this is really important that we give assistance to our cities and towns and counties because in the state of Maine, they were left out of the last package. The governor could choose to use some of the funding that went to the state, but there was none that was directed to our local governments. And yet, already we're seeing towns and cities in our state preparing their budgets, cutting jobs, realizing that the jobs of firefighters, police officers, and school teachers are on the line. We just can't let that happen. And that's why I have co-sponsored a bill that's been introduced in both the Senate and the House that would specifically carve out funding for municipalities and counties. And in Maine, it would mean that cities and towns would receive about $330 million directly, not through the state. The state would receive another pot of money, but directly, and our counties would receive that amount as well.
About the $500 bill, what led you to settle on those amounts, and do you feel confident that Congress will rally around the proposal?
Sound of freedom. Do you want me to hold it?
That's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, so what led continue to settle on those amounts. And what do you feel confident that Congress will rally on proposal for state and local aid? And what are you doing to push that effort forward?
Well, first of all, we've been working with a group that's called No Labels. It is a bipartisan group of both senators and House members, and we've been meeting by Zoom at least once a week to hammer out this bill. The $500 billion figure came from the National Governors Association, the National Association of Counties, and the uh, municipal associations. So that's how we got that funding. It wasn't just plucked out of the air, but rather is based on their best efforts. I would point out that Moody's, a rating agency, has said that Maine is likely to be the most adversely affected state in the nation because of shortfalls in our sales tax, our income tax, our excise tax, even property taxes, because people aren't buying houses right now. And so the effect is across the board. And that's why I feel very strongly that this time we have to have direct aid to our communities, not just to the state. The state needs help too to offset the shortfalls, but so do our communities and our counties.
So, what have been kind of the barriers to get local aid to municipalities? And do you think there's a sense of urgency in Congress about this issue now?
Well, I can tell you what happened last time. What happened last time is Senator Schumer, who represents New York State, put in a provision that said that only cities or counties with 500,000 people or more could receive direct aid from the Treasury. Well, that eliminates any community in the state of Maine. It eliminates any county in the state of Maine. So that provision is unfair and has to go. In fact, I would argue that some of our smaller cities are even more affected. I talked to the town manager of Orono, for example, recently, and she was telling me that their excise taxes are way down because of the delay that's been put in by the state and when they are due. That's a real problem because they're formulating their budgets right now.
As far as the primaries in July, do you support the expanding of voting by mail, or do you think it prompts voter fraud?
Maine, in my view, has a great system for voting, and I don't think we should change Maine's system. It allows what is called no excuses absentee ballot voting, and I've used it myself before when I've had to be in Washington on election day, and it's very easy. You just can go online to request your ballot. It's mailed to you. You cast your ballot and you sign the back of the envelope and then submit it. So there can be a comparison between your signature that's on file and the signature that's on the ballot. But I think our system has made it very easy for people to vote by absentee ballot and will be especially useful this year.
Some mayors in the state have been asking the state government to release some of the money from the CARES Act, but the governor is instead asking for guidance from the federal government. What's the holdup on that?
Well, some states have already released money from the CARES Act to local governments. For example, New Hampshire, I know, has, and New Hampshire has also authorized some hazard pay for firefighters and other first responders. So I believe, based on the experience of other states, that it can be done. The state received approximately $1.2 billion from the CARES Act to help with the expenses of the COVID-19. One area where I think the governor is absolutely right, and that is there's been concern that the restrictions on the use of the money are too tight. And part of what the bill that I've introduced would do with my colleagues is loosen those restrictions. Now, the Treasury Department has put out some guidance that makes the restrictions less tight, but I think it would be good if we did it in law.